Well, greetings. Welcome to another edition of the Has Been podcast. I'm your resident Has Been host. On today's date is Friday, February 27th, and lots to look back on, lots to look ahead when dealing with both Purdue basketball teams. Just as a side note, Purdue football spring practice starts next week. Hold your applause till the end. But yeah, it's a revamped roster again, and it is spring practice, so you do get a little bit of a look at who's here and what they might be able to do, and it'll culminate spring practice with what they're calling a showcase event on April 11th at Ross-Ade Stadium. So that'll be the public's first chance to see what this football team might be about as they head into the 2026 season. But basketball is at the front of the discussion, and we'll just start with what happened Thursday at Mackey Arena, which is no longer the fortress it once was for Purdue. The Boilermakers lost to Michigan State 76-74, fourth home loss of the year, third in the Big Ten, and that's going to be the reason why they don't win the league, along with Michigan being really good this year. There's two factors, and but last night's loss could knock Purdue out of the top four, which is the triple bye, a new term that we're using in the Big Ten this year because there's 18 teams, and all the teams in the men's side go to the conference tournament. So you have a 6-day event that starts on Tuesday, then lasts into the next millennium. It would appear. Um, but the loss is going to it's going to be tough for Purdue to get in the top four. Michigan's going to be the number one seed. They've already clinched a share of the title, and they play Illinois on Friday night. And even if they don't beat Illinois, they're gonna win the title outright. Um, so there's one of the top fours that's gone. Now you're in competition with Illinois if you're Purdue, but you already lost to Illinois. You're in competition with Michigan State. You already lost to Michigan State. You're in competition with Nebraska. Purdue did beat Nebraska. And then lurking just outside the top four and five is Wisconsin, which Purdue did beat, and then they do play to finish the regular season next weekend, and UCLA, which beat Purdue in Los Angeles back in January. So the tiebreakers are not necessarily in Purdue's favor. They're they're in somewhat good shape because they got 3 games left. If you can win those 3 games, that would put you at uh, 15 and 5. Does that sound right? Let me double check that real quick. I keep forgetting what their Big Ten record is. And but yeah, I think no, I think it'd be 16 and 4. My bad. Yeah. No, it would be 15 and 5. Yeah, if they went out to be 15 and 5. And if Illinois and Michigan State are currently at 13 and 4, and both teams have to play Michigan, Illinois on Friday, and then Michigan the last day of the regular season. So you can get into um, a big old tiebreaker, and then you just have to you hope that you come out ahead enough to get one of those last remaining 3 seeds. Because right now the race is for seeds 2, 3, and 4, and you're going to have 4 teams going for those 3 spots, um, maybe a fifth, depending what Wisconsin does and UCLA does. But right now, Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue, and Nebraska are the 4 teams going for those last 3 spots. Um, and that's important because if you want to go win the Big Ten tournament, you don't want to play 4 games in 4 days. Uh, the preference is 3 games in 3 days, and because you do have to think ahead, you could make a long run in the Big Ten tournament, and then you got to turn around and play Thursday at noon in the NCAA tournament. A lot of coaches don't like the Big Ten tournament because it can zap some of your energy, um, but they don't approach it that way. When they're in their little meetings without their team, they do probably discuss that a little bit. But this is Purdue's last chance also to get some hardware before the NCAA tournament. It doesn't appear as of right now that Purdue will be making a deep, deep run in the NCAA tournament. And when I say a deep run, that's going to the Final Four, which was the expectation at the beginning of the year. But the way that they are playing and some of the deficiencies that continue to pop up would tell you that they're not among the elite. Uh, they're not among the elite in the Big Ten because Michigan is elite. I think Illinois is elite. I wouldn't put Michigan State elite. Um, Nebraska's not elite, a really good team. And these teams that are going to finish below Michigan and Illinois are really good teams. But I look at Michigan as elite. You look at Arizona as elite. You go across the country, UConn's elite, Duke's elite. Um, but beyond that, I don't know if there's some there are teams that play elite on certain days, but when you look for the consistency of it, I think those four, maybe you throw Iowa State in there um, as a possibility. It doesn't mean Purdue can't beat any of those teams. If it would face Michigan again, it can certainly beat Michigan because Michigan probably is not going to hit 13 three-pointers as it did at Mackey Arena to beat Purdue because the next game Michigan hit four three-pointers. So they're human. Everybody's human. But I wouldn't put Purdue in the elite category. I think coming into the year they were elite, and on paper they were elite, and they played elite basketball for long stretches. They pound Alabama, they pound Texas Tech. Um, they did get run out of Mackey Arena by Iowa State, but even in the conference season, they started strong. And again, a lot of their um, better marquee games came later in the year, and they just haven't performed well enough to beat those teams. And that part of the reason why not winning the Big Ten title this year is a disappointment because they had the better teams in the league at home. And when you looked at the schedule, they had Michigan at home, had Illinois at home, you had Michigan State at home. You had to go to Nebraska. You didn't know exactly who Nebraska was at the beginning of the year, but as the year went on and that game approached, it was a much is going to be a very difficult game, which it turned out to be, which Purdue made it more difficult than it should. But my point is, Purdue had the heavyweights in the league at home for this season, and it didn't take advantage of it. In fact, lost to Michigan, lost to Illinois, lost to Michigan State, all home games. Um, and that's probably the disappointing part because everything was in your favor to win the Big Ten this year because of who you were playing at home. And they go 0-3 in those games, and that's going to be the reason why they don't win the Big Ten, which makes the Big Ten tournament important if you want to get a ring or a trophy or whatever heading into the NCAA tournament. Um, but this team needs to clean up a lot of things. Um, I'm somewhat amazed they only got 20 minutes out of Oscar Clough Thursday night. Um, I mean, we're late February, and Matt Painter talked about him being gassed in the post-game press conference. That's a little surprising this late in the year. I mean, he got off to a great start. He was the reason they got off to a great start. He dominated down low, and there was one play in the game early, I think before the first media timeout. He had scored, and those of you that are familiar with the way Michigan State plays, they push the ball in transition. That's what they've always done. You know it's coming, and they did it after a made basket. And Oscar busted his butt all the way down the floor and tipped the ball out of bounds underneath Michigan State's basket. Which, okay, the hustle was there from everybody early in the game. But he scored 8 points and then just kind of disappeared the rest of the way and only played 20 minutes. Daniel Jacobson, um, that poor guy needs to get stronger, and I don't know if that's possible. He gets pushed around a lot. Um, he's big and he's tall. I should say he's tall, not big. Um, but he's tall and he's a shot blocker. He's a rim protector and all that. But the physicality in the Big Ten, I think, has forced him out of his comfort zone a little bit. But 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 back to Oscar. Maybe this is just who Oscar is against Big Ten competition. He had a good non-conference season, um, but maybe the Big Ten's a different animal, especially when you get to the elite teams, and maybe that's just who he is, or there's something else going on there. I'm not going to claim to know that, but they do need him to be better than he has been for longer stretches in order uh, to win these three games and then do well in the Big Ten tournament and also um, make a run in the NCAA tournament. But the key for that game against Michigan State, Purdue only turned it over 9 times, but Michigan State capitalized and scored 19 points off those turnovers. And yeah, sorry about that. And that was the game. And plus they hit 15 of their first 25 shots to start the second half. And once they got the lead, they didn't let up. And they got up 8. Purdue got it to 2 a couple times, and then late they missed a free throw. Purdue had a chance to tie or win the game with 3.4 seconds left, and any all inbounds plays have multiple options, and the ball ended up in Braden Smith's hands. He didn't get the best of looks. It was a long three from the middle of the floor, um, and it didn't look like it had a chance uh, to go in. Um, but they came back. They gave themselves an opportunity to win or go to overtime, but it didn't happen. And now they got to scramble to make that top four, and that's a big deal for this program to do that. And they need to, you're at Ohio State Sunday, you're at Northwestern, and then you're home to Wisconsin on what will be a special day because of the seniors and everything that they've done for the program and how they've helped raise the level of the program to even a higher place. You just think about all the things that have happened um, during their careers here at Purdue. And it's not just those three, but you have Zach Edey that played a role in that, Lance Jones, other players. But when you look at their 4 years of playing, um, they've certainly raised the level of what Purdue basketball is about, but that'll come next week in what will probably be an emotional senior day uh, for this team. They need to get themselves right. The talent is there, um, and again, some of it's who you play and when you play them, but they need to get themselves going, and maybe this 3 game stretch will help them do that. But I'll say that Ohio State's desperate for a quad one win. They don't have any, and they probably need one to get in the NCAA tournament. And this probably will be the Buckeyes' last opportunity before the Big Ten tournament to have a chance at an elite team to knock off and add to their resume. Going to Northwestern is always difficult, even though the Cats are not what they have been, but they seem to give Purdue trouble up there. And then you're closing with Wisconsin. Um, Wisconsin got on a good streak in the middle of the Big Ten, but they lost to Oregon the other night. That's an alarming loss. Um, but it'll be senior day and all that kind of stuff. So still a lot to play um, for this team, and how this all shakes out. How last night's loss affects the NCAA seeding. It it's one of those. Well, if the season ended today, where would they be? They would probably be on the 3 line. And as I think I've said before, based on how this season has played out and how the NCAA committee um, brackets teams and seeds its teams and the emphasis on geography. I don't think Purdue can play in St. Louis and Chicago. I think they can play in one and not the other. Just based on all the factors there that go into it. When the season started, the perceived path was Purdue would start in St. Louis first and second rounds. If you won there, you go to Chicago, and then the Final Four is in Indy. Um, again, the way that I look at it, and I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds here, but the way I look at it, and I'm a nerd about this. Um, I don't see, I don't think it's possible for Purdue to play in St. Louis and Chicago. Another site for Purdue in the first and second round would be Buffalo, because that would be the next closest one. And then if it's not Chicago for Purdue, it's probably um, either Washington, D.C. or Houston as the two. And I know in the bracket reveal they had Purdue in the West. Um, but that was just a snapshot at the moment. Lots of things have changed since then. And the one thing I think you got to keep in mind is part of the committee criteria is that the top three teams from each conference have to be separated in different regions. So in this case, like as of right now, Michigan would be the first Big Ten team off the board. They would most likely be in the Midwest. So that eliminates the second and third team from the Big Ten from going to the Midwest. They would have to go elsewhere. Now, if you're the fourth Big Ten team, then you can join another Big Ten team in a region, and that's a way Purdue can get to Chicago. If they're the three seed, they're on the three line, and they're in a position to go to Chicago. You could have Michigan as a one and Purdue as a three. And that's very possible. But for if that was the case, then Purdue would not likely go to St. Louis because Illinois would be in front of them. Maybe Michigan State would be in front of them. Maybe Nebraska would be in front of them. And when you start um, putting that thing together, um, St. Louis is going to get scooped up by Illinois, possibly Iowa State, possibly maybe Nebraska. You know, Michigan State, based on geography, um, you know, you might find this hard to believe, but Buffalo is closer to Ann Arbor than St. Louis, and so therefore Buffalo is probably closer to Michigan State than it is, or East Lansing than it is to St. Louis. So anyway, that's a brief snapshot of how I think this might play out as we get closer. But a lot of moving parts in this thing. The women's basketball team, they face a must-win situation on Sunday. They lost to Oregon earlier this week. Um, Again, it was a game where they turned the ball over 21 times. Oregon scored 31 points, and that was basically the ball game. The last two games in Mackey Arena, men and women, the opponents have scored a combined 50 points against Purdue teams, and that's like 34% of the total points that were scored. So points off turnovers really hurt both teams in those back-to-back days that they played at Mackey Arena. Of course, the women are playing without Madison Layden-Zay, dislocated kneecap on February 14th against Rutgers. She's not played the last three games. I don't anticipate her playing Sunday. I anticipate her career being over. She hasn't practiced, to my knowledge. Um, she hadn't practiced going into the Oregon game, and she would need to practice Friday and Saturday and show great signs of improvement and not limp when she walks in order to play. And it's just not going to happen. So Purdue's going to go to Evanston without its best player and look to beat Northwestern. Now, Northwestern's not a great team. They're at the bottom of the standings. But Sunday will be Coach Joe McEwen's last game after 40 years in coaching. Not all those 40 years as a head coach. Not all those at Northwestern. He started in New Mexico State, and then moved to George Washington, and then has been at Northwestern here for a long time. Um, but it'll be his last game, so they'll have more people than the 500 or 1,000 that normally show up for a game at Northwestern. It could have two, three, 4,000, maybe five. Um, most of them being Joe's family, I think, because they're all probably flying in. Um, so Purdue's going to have to fight that. They're going to have to play another game without their their leader on the floor on Wednesday. You know, if Layden plays, I can't sit here and tell you they win the game, but they don't. I don't think they have 21 turnovers. I think you you're cutting probably four or five of those turnovers um, off the board. That's four or five possessions, maybe where you get the score. Um, but you know, she helps this team kind of get in the right spot and help calm things down. And they they missed that on Thursday. Now, now she if she would have played against Maryland, I don't think the outcome would have been different. Same with Iowa. I don't think the outcome would have been different. But you know, maybe the outcome would have been different on on Wednesday against Oregon. You know, Purdue got off to another slow start. They were down 9-0, then gave up a 9-0 run to end the first half. They clawed their way back into the game and made it closer down the stretch. But you're also, you know, you're not playing without your leader, number one, and you're also playing without your, you know, the career leader in three pointers for the program. And Purdue did not shoot well from 3-point range once again. Um, so I don't know if they win the game, but I'm pretty confident in saying that they would not have had 21 turnovers. They still would have had turnovers because Oregon's length and athletic ability, the way they play, they're one of the nation's top teams in steals. I think they would have still turned Purdue over, but maybe not to the level that it became. And if there's four or five possessions where you don't turn it over and you happen to score, you know, that can change the whole game. But I don't think this is the best situation for this program going on the road, even if it's at Northwestern, especially with what Northwestern has going on for this Purdue team to go and win this game. There's not a high level of confidence that I have for this team to pull that off. They can win, but it's going to take a you know a really steady and consistent and uh, not a turnover filled game to win. But this is a must win for Purdue. They have to win to make the tournament. And even if they win, there's no guarantee that they make it because of all the different scenarios that are out there. Chaos would have to really um, um, rear its head if Purdue won and it didn't make the tournament. You're looking at Wisconsin needing to beat Iowa. You're looking at Oregon needing to beat Washington. You're looking at some other scenarios that gets Purdue in some tiebreakers that they would not come out on top. So again, a lot of different things would have to happen. Penn State playing Indiana on Saturday plays a role, but not the final role. And Purdue loses the tiebreaker to Penn State because they lost the head-to-head. Indiana, they split their two meetings, and then the way the Big Ten tiebreakers work, you go if you're 1-1, then you go all the way to the top, and you start looking at how each team did against UCLA is the number one team. So both Indiana, Purdue are 0-1. You keep working your way down the final standings, and you can do it today, but we don't know for sure how the standings are going to look. And when you get to a team like Oregon, you know, we don't know for sure where they're going to finish. And if Washington would beat Oregon on Sunday, then Washington would be ahead of Oregon, and Purdue beat Washington, but lost to Oregon. IU beat Oregon, but lost to Washington. So in that case, Purdue would have an edge in the tiebreaker because of the placement of the standings. But if Oregon wins that game on Sunday, then that pushes Oregon up, Washington down, and then you've got a whole different scenario going on. That's why the games matter, obviously, but where teams finish in the standings also matter when you get down to the tiebreakers. And there's some online platforms that allow you to play out a bunch of scenarios. They have built all the tiebreakers in, but you don't know exactly for sure if every single parameter is in there. But the way it looks right now, Purdue has to win. If Purdue loses, the season's over. And then there's a whole nother discussion after that. But if Purdue wins, they will have a chance to make the Big Ten tournament. And the question then becomes, if they do win, is that progress? Is that enough progress? The athletic director, Mike Bobinski, has said that he wanted to see progress, real progress with this program in Katie's fifth year. Would that, they didn't make the tournament last year, and this was a goal for them to make the tournament this year. And they know, I mean, they know the situation. It's just a matter of will they, this, I don't want to say the pressure of it, but just knowing the circumstances, knowing you have to win, how does that affect this team when it doesn't have one of its best players on the floor? And who's the person that's going to step up and lead them? And that's, but but if they make the Big Ten tournament, is that progress enough? I mean, they're 12 and 16. They were 10 and 19 last year, so they have two more wins. Um, they are 4 and 13 in the Big Ten. They have one more win. Uh, but when you look at this, the numbers of it all and the wins and losses, they have made progress. But a lot of that's on Purdue, but also it's what happens in the rest of the league. What what has what do the other teams look like and who you playing and where you playing them? There's a lot of factors involved. But when you look at the play on the court from Purdue's standpoint, there's some progress there, but I wouldn't call it significant leaps. Again, you're going to finish under 500 for the third straight year with your record. That's happened in this program, but not for a long, long time. So, and that's a decision that you know will need to be made. I don't think you get to this point of the year and not know what you're going to do. I just don't. I don't think that. Um, there are. It's a traditionally rich program, but as you live in today and now, a lot of people don't understand what this women's program was many years ago. There are a few people out there that understand it and see it and know it. Would love for it to come back to where it was. That's not realistic at this point. But the question now becomes, when you look at the long term, do they have the right people in place to push this program out of the bottom, where you're not in this position every year in the Big Ten, fighting on the last day of the regular season to make a 15-team Big Ten tournament, which you're probably not going to advance very far in. If you win one game, that's probably a success. Then you're going to play a team that's probably already beaten you. Um, but that's the overriding question that this administration has to answer is when you look long term, again, do they have the right people in place? Are they doing the right things? Um, and then you got to make a decision. And I've always said, and I'll continue to harp on this, the decision to move on from somebody is not really the hard decision, in my opinion. The hard decision here, at least here at Purdue, is what are you doing on the back end if you make that decision? And I'm not saying they should make that decision one way or the other. I'm just laying it out. It's not the first question, it's the second question. Second question, what are you doing on the back end? What resource in any and if you do make a change, any coach that comes in here is going to want A, B, C, D, go down the alphabet from NIL funding to making sure the staff is fully funded. And and it is funded, but there's a couple GA positions that have not been filled. Does this program need a general manager? What other support personnel does this program need to pull itself up out of the basement of the Big Ten. There's recruiting, there's portal recruiting, there's the whole thing, there's player development, there's a lot of boxes you got to check. But what are you doing on the back end? And and to me, that's the most important question of all this. As I said, I don't think a decision, the first decision is that difficult. It's the second decision that now obviously the first decision affects what you do on the back end. I mean, if you decide that this is the right group that you want for this program, okay, now, then what are you going to do to help fund this program, increase some financial resources, so on and so forth. And do you got to make changes on your staff? I would say this: if they bring back Katie, I don't think you can. I don't think you can go out and say, well, everything's fine, status quo, no changes on the staff, no changes elsewhere, so on and so forth. I don't think you can do that. If you are going to bring her back, there's the buyout. It's 1.6 million right now, but those are Purdue's not writing a check for $1.6 million the day that they would move away from her. She would get paid in monthly installments, just like Ryan Walters is currently getting paid in monthly installments after he got fired from Purdue. So you're not out 1.6 million today, but over time you are, and that's money that can go elsewhere. You have to pay your men's basketball players and your football players. You got to pay your women's basketball players. You got to pay your volleyball players. So it's just 1.6 million that over time you don't have. And Purdue's still paying for Ryan Walters. They're paying this year some football coaches that they fired. I did add it up. I did add it up, and I wrote it on a napkin. Um, it appears when you look at what I would call dead money Purdue is paying during this calendar year of 2026, it's $4.9 million to, um, let me count them up here. One, two, three, to four individuals. They're paying a combined $4.9 million in this calendar year to nine or to four individuals. If you add Katie on that, that's five individuals, and that takes that mark over $5 million of kind of dead money that you're just that you can't use. You can't use over here, and your budget's already tight. You're already going to need help from the the university to balance your budget at the end of the year because there's just no way you're going to show a profit when you have to immediately remove $20.5 million out of your budget to pay for revenue share. And the way that works is that the Big Ten is holding back $20.5 million from every school because that's the revenue share cap. They're holding back $20.5 million from each school from the media rights, which in the last fiscal report was in the neighborhood of 65, $68 million each school was getting, depending on some different circumstances there. So you're lopping off 20 half million. You're already $20.5 million in the hole on July 1st of 2025, and then the fiscal year ends on June 30th of 2026. So you're already $20.5 million in the hole. And Purdue's been trying to work to close that gap as much as possible, but it's not really realistic for them that they would come out of this even on their own. So they're going to need some help from the university, and the university has made a 3-year commitment to help them get through this, and then we'll see what happens after that. Um, so there's a financial component to all this, and it's real, um, and other factors involved. I mean, I do know that the women's program does have revenue share. I think it's in line with most other Big Ten schools, give or take a few dollars here and there. But the other component, NIL, this women's program doesn't have. There's just not enough donor support for that. Um, compared to other schools, UCLA, USC, um, Michigan, Iowa, so on. So, a lot of programs have more NIL money to to understand. I think it's important for people to understand there's two buckets here: the revenue sharing, which comes from the university, and NIL, which is a third party type of deal. Um, they're two separate things. They are two separate things, but you combine them, and then you are able to pay your athletes. And and Katie does have money left over from um, her initial uh, pot of cash that in the revenue share department. So she has money this spring to work with to go out, and the way I view it is you have X number of dollars left over. Use that money basically as a signing bonus for some players or maybe players that you want to retain. And then on July 1st, the new revenue share cap kicks in, and that amount goes up, I think, to in the neighborhood of 21, $22 million. It's a 4% increase. So maybe, you know, how does Purdue handle the 4% increase? Do they do 2% to men's basketball, 2% to football, 3% to football, 1% to men's basketball? Does volleyball and women's basketball get any part of that increase? I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure that's in the works or has been decided how that'll happen. You do have to financially support the programs that bring you in revenue. That's clear. You have to do it because that keeps your department going, that funds the other sports, um, and all that kind of stuff. So, but those are just some of the things that are probably, are on the horizon for the women's program as far as what's going to happen. And again, if you talk to 10 people, and I've talked to more than 10 people, or 10 people have talked to me, you know, some think they need to make a change. Others like, no, they're gonna stay the course. So, um, but you're late in the year. I would guess some sort of decision has been made, and whether obviously they're going to make a change, they'll make a formal announcement. But if they don't, are they going to make a formal announcement? I don't, I'm not, they didn't last year. But anyway, that's kind of where things stand. Bottom line is Purdue needs to win on Sunday. Does a win calms the waters, not the Walters, but the waters somewhat, and get you in the tournament and get you to a place that you were not last year. Um, and again, will that be enough? Um, and then when you factor everything in, how do you move forward? And again, it goes back to what you're doing on the back end, in my opinion, more than what you're doing on the front end. Uh, Spring, as I mentioned, spring football starts next week, and will end April 11th with the showcase. And and again, women Sunday at Northwestern, men Sunday at Ohio State. Be back next week to recap and then look ahead and see what's coming up, see where the teams stand, and all that kind of stuff. So appreciate you stopping by. Have a good day, and we'll talk next week.